Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Tipsy Thursdays, WFM Tipsy Thursdays. I am your show host, Juanita Coley, the Contact Center Whisperer, the CEO and founder of Solid Rock Consulting, and I am super excited about this episode because, listen, Sarah is giving us all of the deets around workforce management. She's talking to us about so many good things in this episode, but the question that we are going to be answering today, okay? Do y'all want to know the question we're going to be answering today? The question that we're going to be talking about today are what are some of the common challenges around workforce management? And Sarah Gosha, all the way over from United Healthcare and launching, we'll talk about it. We're going to be talking about it here coming up here shortly. But we're talking about common WFM challenges. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to hop right in. Before we hop into the questions, tell us a little bit about when you first discovered workforce management, and why did you fall in love with it?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for having me on today. I'm so excited, and I'm a great guest for Tipsy Thursday, so thank you so much. I think where I fell in love with it was really when I was in government. I went to our central office and really saw that we had staff across the state. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, how do I know that all this staff across the state is doing what we think they should be doing? And I started seeing models and getting smarter and working with our actuaries and working with our finance crew and saying, wait a second, we support all of those people. And we started talking about how there's pieces and parts of so many people that support each of the FTEs. And when you understand that, you start to understand the magnitude of what it costs, what turnover costs, what training costs by the time you go through it, and how important it is to really bring leadership in that understands workforce management in a way to help the organization stay attuned and within budget.
I love that, to stay attuned and in within budget. Now, we were talking previously, and so you just, listen, guys, I'm gonna tell y'all the truth, okay? Sarah started going in on some of the challenges, and I was like, we got to hit record. Like, this is so good. And so I'm super excited, like I said before, to have you with us. What are some of the common challenges? You were sharing with me some of the common challenges that you've seen, and you have such a unique perspective as well, because most time workforce management is looked at from the lens of just the contact center. But in one of my first books that I wrote, The Corporate Playbook, I talk about workforce management and the discipline in just business, period, right? Whether it's a startup, whether it's government, whether it's whatever, and how the discipline is so appropriate for any business model. And you started to lean into that and share some of that, especially with your background in government. So can you tell me what are some of the common challenges or mistakes or myths that people have around workforce management?
Yeah, of course. Spending time in government and then in consulting, and now I've been at a Fortune 5 company. It really has shown me how much depth and breadth there is, especially when the business is really thinking about what it needs. And some of the challenges that we tend to run into is when we start to streamline services, right? Whether that's for a call center, whether that's national, but more the shared services, right? I've got to have an attorney for so many different people. I've got to make sure I have a finance person for X number of people. And so what I see people doing is really just adding up the salary and fringe of people and then saying this is the cost, but it's not. It's much broader than that. And so you really have to take into account a couple things. One, all the pieces and parts of people that support through shared services. That's all the way from people that may sort mail, though now I'm dating myself. I mean, I don't, there's probably not mail centers in government anymore, but from the people that help, from executive assistants all the way up to legal counsel, to the finance folks, to anyone that's sitting writing contracts, network partners. You have to really start thinking of that and saying, wait a second, I use 0.01% of that person's time is into this business segment, and here's what they help us with. And so as I think about streamlining business, I think about, okay, what does it take to support? Where should the resources best fit? And then making sure that we have the right people in place to drive the business forward. I think the other thing that we were talking about just, briefly, is when government especially wants to delegate things out, right? So we say this in healthcare, we say in government in general, right? We say government is big, it's bulky, there's all this cost, we're going to give it to the private sector. But we have to understand is government has a ton of shared services, all the way from the federal government to the state to the local government, right? They have a lot of shared service partners. And so when I think about that, I think to myself, that's okay. But if you delegate to a mom and pop, a startup, other small providers, what they don't have is the shared service. So I wrote a paper back when I was in consulting that talked just about this topic on a micro level, right?
Mm,
Where we said those shared services really need to stay either with a large agency or a consortium with smaller, more agile agencies underneath, right? And
mm.
my paper is on my LinkedIn and I would love people to read it. It's older now, but the concepts are the same, like your book, right? The fact of the matter is it stays. And so you have to think of all the pieces and parts. The other thing we had a privilege of talking about is the shrinkage rate, right?
Yeah.
So as people have moved back home to work, and having been working from home for 11 years, so before it was cool in the pandemic to work from home, I
Right.
worked from home. But you really have to think about your shrinkage rate. So you think about centers, right, and call centers and stuff, you can probably get that rate down to 11 to 15%. There's some good tech that can kind of help streamline and see what everyone's working on. But when you talk about people that are working at home, that percentage, in my estimation, is closer to 34%, because you have to think of all the meetings you have people going to. You have to think about all the time they go take a break, let the dog out that's barking during a call, let the laundry machine start, right? You just think of all that time that's there. And people really get mired down in that stuff, but you can make some good estimations about it. So, as you're thinking about your workforce management models, it is imperative that you take all those things into account. I can't tell you how many times people call me and say, well, just give me the salary and fringe of the person. And I said, I don't think that will do it justice. I think you have to step back and we have to think about all the shared services and all the shrinkage rates, and then build a model that is truly going to meet your workforce challenges while staying on budget. So, like, what I like to tell people is there's two things you're trying to do, right? The two goals are get the work done in the most efficient, streamlined manner, and then having the right people in the right seats and not have turnover so that you can drive it forward. Turnover is so costly and we see it more and more. And so anticipating turnover and then making sure you know the difference between good turnover and bad turnover is very important.
Hey there, it's Juanita Coley here, and I want to personally invite you to book a WFM Discovery call where we will talk through what your CX customer experience and your EX employee experience goals are for your organization and how you can obtain them by leveraging the WFM discipline. Yes, that's right. Workforce management and operations can work hand in hand together, and I want to talk to you about your goals. How can you have culture and have it efficiently? How can you achieve customer experience without sacrificing on employee experience? That's what we're going to be talking about. So click the link, schedule your call at wfmbuildingbridges.com, and I am excited to dive deep with you. See you soon. Listen, Una came through here and dropped so many gems in just the first. We haven't even been on 10 minutes yet, Sarah. Okay, you got to slow down. Okay, you got to slow down.
Okay. Let's take it one step at a time.
So much fire. You hear me? Okay, so the first thing was the shared services. This is a big myth and mistake that people have, like when they are trying to allocate, when we're thinking about workforce management inside of organizations, that shared service really, from your perspective, needs to stay at the enterprise or the higher level, and then be able to delegate some of those very niche things throughout the biz to the entities that they're going to be serving, or the business units that they're going to be serving. And then the second big nugget, right, is that shrinkage, right, that you talked about, is how you're getting that down, and being able to think about and knowing the differences between how we're categorizing what for shrinkage, and being able to identify good turnover versus bad turnover. It's so many good things. Okay, all right, because I'll be here all day.
Yeah.
Next question I have for you is, what would you share as a tip for, or suggestion for, people who are, trying to overcome this shared services, or they're like, this is another good question. Sorry, I just had this mid thought. What, for people who are asking, I've never had to engage from a workforce management from a shared services model before. What would be one of the tips that you would give someone?
Yeah, I think a couple things you want to do is get really smart about the tools that you're using. So I think there's really three tools that I think of when I look at workforce management. It's one, simplified calculators, right? Understanding how many hours are there in a year, what do we need to do, right? From an hours perspective, and then how do we make sure that we're calculating that correctly. The second thing is, everybody talks about time studies, but time studies are just time studies. It depends on if it's self-reported. It depends on if you've got a third party reporting. It depends. There's so many nuances to it. So get really, really smart about how you're capturing time. Are you going to do it by minutes, hours? Are you going to do it by days? Are you going to do it by meeting type, right? You have to really, really, really think about time studies. Too many times I have consulted with people and they said, we've got a time study. And then I look at it and it's self-reported. And I've said, who validated it? Who looked at it? Who's actually saying this takes 90 minutes? Did you
Right.
check an employee that was the fastest, and then probably someone who's intermediate and somebody who's a little slower? Because if you only have the best of the best doing it, right, that's not a representative sample of really what the time it takes, right? Because you're always going to have people that are faster at different things. And then I would say the third thing you want to do is have really good allocation tool across the business, right? So calculator, right? Time study, and then allocation methodology are really the three things you need. And then when you think about allocation, all the things we just talked about, right? You've got to know how you're going to allocate the time, and you have to do it equitably. And then you can make recommendations. What you don't want to do is put stuff on paper that doesn't have a sound methodology, because when you do, right, and you're the workforce management expert, they're going to hold you to that, because they're writing forecasts and budgets and approving FTEs. And there is a lot of money caught up in staffing, right? And this is a discussion for another day. We can talk about AI. I'd love to come back and do that someday. But what I know is we're always going to have people in our business. That's going to happen, especially when you're in government and customer centered business. And so I think it's really important to have those tools and use them over and over. You have to be able to replicate your methodology. People will come in and ask you how you got there. And if you do not know the math,
Come on.
and you do not know how to do
Come
things,
on.
the fact of the matter is, it'll be out the window and they'll allocate the way they want.
Yeah.
So you've
Which is why
got
I
to be able
think
to defend it.
that's such a great point, is because I think this is one of the challenges when we're talking to organizations and we're talking to leaders, and they're like, we have such a hard time getting buy-in with operations, or getting executive leaders, sponsorship on whatever it is that they're trying to, the agenda. And the thing is, usually if you have that challenge, it's because you haven't been able to articulate the how. You know, like, it's like, this is the why. How did you get to this number? How did you, right? You can't just come to me and say, oh yeah, I want to, hire all these people. It's going to make service level go away. Or I want to fire all these people and bring in AI because this is what's going to make this. Like, how did we show your math? They used to say that in school, right? Like the math teacher, show your work, right?
Yeah.
Because your math ain't mathing. Right. You got to be able to show your work and tell the story. There's a story behind the number that needs to be articulated. And if you can't successfully do that, then many times you have a challenge getting buy-in into whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so you hit the nail on the head when you say you have to be able to understand your tech stack. You have to be able to understand your numbers. You have to be able to understand how do I get alignment with the business outcome that I am trying to help push forward and advance in. It's not about my own agenda as the workforce management leader, right? It's how do I align what the task is that I'm trying to do with the overall business objective and outcome and goal. When I can do that, then I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to get a yes for anything. And it's not because they just love Juanita so much, right? It's because that's not the case, right? I mean, I am fabulous, hair flip.
You
right?
are.
But it's not because I'm just so fabulous. It's because I've aligned my task with the overall goals, the business overall goals and objectives. And that's so key. You hit the nail on the head there. And I think that that's super, super important. We have been talking for a good little minute. I knew that the time was going to just go like this. Thank you so much, Sarah, for hanging out with me today on the show. Before I let you go, though, I got one final question for you, okay?
Of course.
What's next for Sarah, and where can we find you if we want to connect with you deeper?
Please find me on LinkedIn. I will be launching my first LLC named after my family here, Carroll Management Consulting. You can find me out there. Would love to talk to anyone. I, of course, will be out on LinkedIn. I am a member. I am a chief. So you can find my profile there on Chief for Women in Business as we continue to chart the course to really elevate women in the workforce. And Juanita, you are such an amazing light. And I hope you have me back because I would love to talk about anything else we would like to talk about, from hair scarves to hair tips to anything you would want to do. So I really thank you. It's been a complete and utter pleasure. And I look forward to seeing many of you out there across the U.S. as we continue to help people live better lives.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. How amazing. We got to have Sarah back, right? All right. I know. Calm down. We're going to have her back. Jeez. Okay. Listen, Sarah did such an amazing job. One of the things that I have not heard anybody come on the show and talk about was shared services and the impact to WFM and that whole thought process, which is such a big, you have so many hidden assets. Right. When you think about shared services and the impacts to workforce management, you have a lot of loss, a lot of times, a lot of waste, but you also get a lot of gain depending on how you're looking at it and how you're utilizing your resources. And so that's something that I think is a really, really great topic for us to drill down deeper on. So stay tuned for more conversation around shared services and workforce management. The evolution. I'm so extra. All right. Listen, if there's a topic that you all want to cover, you already know what to do. Send me a message, inbox me, DM me, make a comment here. You already know what to do. Until next time, go be great and let's make impact. See you guys soon. Bye.